What if the most damaging political revelation of the year didn't come from an opposition leak, a congressional hearing, or even a journalist's expose, but from the former First Lady herself? Because that's exactly what may be happening right now. Jill Biden's new memoir is not just a personal story. It's reopening one of the most painful and unresolved questions in modern American politics. What exactly happened inside the Biden White House before that catastrophic 2024 debate, and who knew what, when? In the book and in recent interviews, Jill Biden says that while watching Joe Biden on the debate stage, she was terrified. She says she wondered if he was having a stroke. She says she had never seen him like that before or since. And yet, just moments later, she went on stage and publicly praised him. That contrast is now reigniting anger, sympathy, suspicion, and a much bigger argument about power, loyalty, and political denial at the top of the Democratic Party. For global audiences, this is not just another Washington memoir story. Remember, the United States is not just any country. It is the world's largest military power, the anchor of NATO, a central player in the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, and a country whose internal political stability affects currencies, markets, alliances, and conflict calculations across the globe. So when the family closest to an American president reveals that even they were frightened by what the world saw on live television, that matters far beyond U.S. borders. And that's why this story is bigger than Jill Biden's book tour. It goes to the heart of presidential capacity, public trust, elite gatekeeping, and how major parties manage, or fail to manage, political decline. The emotional center of this whole story is the June 2024 debate. According to Jill Biden's own account, she was not calmly observing a rough night. She was alarmed. In interviews with CBS, NBC, and others, she says she feared something medically serious was happening. The Atlantic, which obtained the memoir early, reported that she wondered whether Joe Biden was having a stroke, whether he had been drugged, and even described the moment as feeling like they were watching an AI hologram glitch in real time. That is extraordinary language. Because for nearly 2 years, the public argument around that debate has been whether it exposed a long-running decline or a shocking one-night collapse. Jill Biden's memoir tries to land firmly on the second explanation. She says what happened on stage was not how he was day to day. She insists she still does not know what happened. She suggests possibilities: exhaustion, illness, overpreparation, medication, even a cold. But here is the problem for Democrats. Her explanation may actually intensify the controversy instead of calming it. Why? Because if she genuinely thought her husband might be having a stroke on live television, then critics will ask the obvious question: why was that not immediately treated as a major public issue? Why did the messaging afterward remain so upbeat? And why did it take a memoir, nearly 2 years later, for this level of candor to emerge? Then comes the moment that may define the entire memoir. After the debate, Joe Biden reportedly turned to Jill and said, in essence, "I really messed up, didn't I?" In some accounts, the quote is even more blunt, and Jill Biden says she whispered back, "Yes, you did." That one exchange is politically explosive because it tells us 2 things at once. First, Joe Biden himself understood immediately that the debate had been disastrous. Second, Jill Biden understood it too. And yet, within minutes, she publicly appeared before supporters and said he had done a great job, answered every question, and knew all the facts. In later interviews, she defended that decision by saying she is his wife, she had to lift him up, and she was not about to humiliate him in public in front of supporters. On a human level, millions of people will understand that instinct. On a political level, it is exactly the kind of moment critics say damaged public trust. The same act can be seen 2 totally different ways: as marital loyalty or as political image management at a moment of national consequence. And this is where the story stops being personal and becomes structural. Jill Biden says the final decision to stay in the race, and then to leave it, had to be Joe Biden's alone. She has been very clear on that. She says it could not be her call because he would have to live with that decision. She even says that if others felt differently, they should have said so at the time. That line matters because it sounds like a rebuttal not just to critics, but also to prominent Democrats who later suggested the decision-making circle around Biden was too closed. Kamala Harris, in her own memoir, reportedly described the "it's Joe and Jill's decision" attitude as something repeated almost like a mantra. Jill Biden's response has essentially been, if Harris thought it was reckless, she should have spoken up then. That exchange reveals the deeper Democratic wound here. The issue is no longer just whether Biden was too old to run. The issue is whether the party's leaders, donors, strategists, cabinet figures, and allied media all saw warning signs but chose to suppress conflict until the crisis became unavoidable. CNN reported that some Democrats are frustrated this memoir is reopening the age debate just as the party is trying to move on. Others think voters have already emotionally processed Biden as a tragic, aging figure rather than a villain. But either way, the memoir reopens the same brutal question: was this a failure of one man, or a failure of an entire political ecosystem built around deference and denial? To understand why this story is resonating so strongly, you have to understand what Jill Biden is trying to defend. She is not only defending Joe Biden's reputation, she is defending herself against the idea that she was either the enabler, the gatekeeper, or even, as some critics charged, a kind of behind-the-scenes power center keeping an aging president in office. Her memoir and interviews push back on that image. She says, yes, Joe Biden aged. She says everyone saw him aging. She says he sometimes forgot words and slowed down when tired. But she also insists he was still doing the job, working late, reading briefings, passing legislation, and functioning as president. She says doctors assured them he was healthy. She says her role was to support him, not to command him. And in one of the most revealing lines, she says, of course, I could be blinded by love. I hope that I am blinded by love. That is a striking phrase because it works both as a defense and a confession. It tells the audience, I was not calculating. I was loyal. But it also invites another interpretation. If you are blinded by love, are you the best judge of whether a president should seek another term? That tension is what makes this story so powerful. Jill Biden is trying to humanize herself at the exact moment critics are asking whether human emotion got in the way of sober statecraft. The memoir rollout is also expanding beyond the debate. In her CBS interview, Jill Biden defended Joe Biden's decision to pardon Hunter Biden. She said the family believed Hunter would be targeted once Donald Trump returned to power, and she said she supported the pardon. She also suggested that other family pardons were motivated by similar fears of political targeting. This matters because it shows the memoir is not just about one debate night. It is about the Bidens' attempt to explain the entire emotional and political climate of their final period in power. The legal pressure on Hunter, the sense of siege around the family, and the belief that many attacks on them were not simply political, but deeply personal. For supporters, that reinforces the image of a family under relentless assault. For critics, it reinforces a different image, a presidency and a political household that have become increasingly defensive, inward-looking, and convinced that only they truly understood the stakes. And here's the biggest takeaway. This is no longer just about Joe Biden. It's about whether modern democracies have reliable mechanisms for confronting elite decline before it becomes a crisis. It's about whether loyalty can distort judgment at the highest levels. It's about whether governing parties are capable of telling themselves uncomfortable truths when power is on the line. In that sense, this is not only an American story. It's a global one. Across the world, parties and governments often hide weakness until events make the truth impossible to deny. Leaders are protected by family, aides, donors, courtiers, and institutions that all have reasons to delay a reckoning. What Jill Biden's memoir does is pull back the curtain on what that looks like from inside the innermost circle. And it reminds us that in great powers, private decisions inside marriages and families can become public events with geopolitical consequences. The turbulence after Biden's debate performance helped trigger a compressed and chaotic campaign transition, fed questions about U.S. leadership, and ultimately formed part of the backdrop to Donald Trump's return. Allies, rivals, investors, and adversaries all watch moments like that closely. So what is Jill Biden's memoir, really? Is it a love letter to a husband she still believes was unfairly judged? Is it an attempt to reclaim her own image from the accusation that she was complicit in a cover-up? Is it a political defense brief for the Biden legacy? Or is it something even more revealing, a document that unintentionally proves just how emotionally, institutionally, and politically trapped the Democratic establishment had become? Maybe it is all of those things at once. But one thing is clear. Far from closing the book on the Biden years, Jill Biden may have reopened the chapter Democrats most wanted to leave behind. And in politics, the stories parties cannot fully explain are often the ones that haunt them the longest.